Welcome to this webinar on High DPI user interface design with the VCL library. My name is Marco Cantu and I'm one of the RAD Studio product managers. Before we get started, let me explain a couple of things about this webinar. We are muting you, but you can ask questions in the QA panel on the right. You can do that anytime, and we will answer the questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar is recorded, and recording will be made available in our YouTube channel. As mentioned, I'm Marco Cantu, RAD Studio product manager with focus on Delphi. This is my email address, and Marco Cantu is my Twitter handle as well. Now, what are we going to cover in this webinar? We're going to focus on VCL, and specifically on VCL on Windows 10. I'll provide a short overview of the platform and how VCL and Windows 10 interact, and then focus for most of the time on high DPI issues, what's at stake. I'm going to show demos of applications that are not working properly and how to address them. I'm going to focus both on high resolution monitor support and multi-monitor systems, which is a very specifically troublesome area. In terms of actual features, we're going to delve into per monitor v2, which is a Microsoft feature on recent version of Windows, and how VCL supports it through the GetSystemMetric APIs. Also, we're going to highlight issues and solutions around high DPI and images, how you can get images working properly at different resolutions. Now, we won't be able to cover everything and every case around high DPI because that's an extremely complex and multi-phased problem. I'm going to focus on a few areas, and that would be plenty. And hopefully at the end, you'll have a better understanding of what's at stake and some of the solutions that the platform and the VCL library provide to help you solve the issues. Now, let me start focusing shortly on Windows 10 and VCL. Windows 10 is the most used desktop operating system these days. It surpassed Windows 7, although Windows 7 is still extremely relevant, and you shouldn't discard it in terms of target platforms, and I'm pretty sure that's obvious. So the challenge here is how to add Windows 10 feature support without breaking Windows 7 compatibility. That's far from simple because Microsoft is adding interesting features in Windows 10, and those are not actually available on older version of Windows. If we go back to the overview of Windows, which areas it's made of in terms of API and operating system integration, Windows 10 has a mix of technologies. It still has the core classic Win32 APIs. That's because it offers compatibility for existing applications. And notice, these are not static. These are evolving and are being expanded specifically on the high DPI area. Windows offers COM integration, mostly for the shell, for the desktop features. And then there is a whole new set of Win 10 WinRT APIs that are available only on Windows 10 and cannot be used in a Windows 7 application. Now, this is important to consider overall because the WinRT APIs and their controls provide a better model in terms of high DPI. However, if you go that route, your application will not run at all on Windows 7, which for most of our customers is really not a plan, not a solution. The other thing, you'll have to rewrite your application completely, like from the ground up. On the other hand, the classic Win32, Win64 API provides a lot of features and, again, are being extended. But when you're using RAD Studio, you can merge both. So you can use the core API, but also hook to specific WinRT APIs when needed. Those specific product areas will work only on Windows 10. Now, there's another area that I won't discuss in detail, but even the core classic APIs can be distributed through the Windows Store or Microsoft Store because it supports the Dexter Bridge, which is a technology that allows you to take existing Win32 app and distribute on the store. Now, if we focus on what VCL offers in terms of Windows 10 integration, you have not only a great solution, a modern, comprehensive, continuously updated solution, unlike some of the competing libraries in the Windows space, but also a very, very smooth migration path, because most of your existing code will still work with the latest VCL and on the latest version of Windows 10. VCL has support for all of these three APIs, Classic, Com, and WinRT. It has components for each area, so not just the ability to target the API in code, but also ready-to-use components. It has controls that provide the Windows 10 user interface and user experience, but they're built on VCL, so they also run on Windows 7. And similarly, through custom styling, you can adopt a Windows 10 style and deploy the Windows 10 style and the Windows 10 experience also on Windows 7. Finally, RAD Studio has full support for the Dexter Bridge from the IDE. So there's very little you need to do to deploy your application on the Microsoft Store. Well, beside the fact that Microsoft put some hurdles in terms of permissions, but that's not on us. Now, again, that's not the main focus area. So just shortly, these are some of the new VCL controls out of the last few years that offer nice, modern style in terms of user experience, and also help, that's true for some of the panels, with a smoother positioning of controls that helps manage application with different monitor sizes. Regarding styling, again, you can take an existing application, apply a style, and make it look nicer and modern with a fairly limited effort. However, that's not my main focus. My main focus is around High DPI and its effect on Windows 10, how Windows 10 supports High DPI, and how VCL supports High DPI. Let me start from the challenges. It's fairly complex to have a smooth experience that works across monitors with different resolutions and different scaling factors. You often end up having issues with icons that can be too small, too large, or be scaled and appear really fuzzy. In this case here, in this image, icons are shrinked and are way too small compared to what you would expect for this toolbar. But on the other hand, you need to make sure that each of the elements, your code, your controls, the platform elements, all scale properly depending on the target platform. And in this other scenario here on the side, where the same application is shown on a different monitor, you can see that the scroll bars become too big, too wide, and that clearly looks fairly bad. So these are just two examples: system element, checkboxes, scroll bars, icons, images in toolbars, images in menus. They all need to adapt, and it's far from simple to make sure that everything works smoothly. Now, there are different solutions. Even on Windows, the operating systems offer the ability to mark an application as completely unaware of DPI, and then Windows will do the scaling. But in most cases, you'll end up with really fuzzy text and images. Windows offers a sort of a fallback, which is clearly better than nothing. It can help you keep old application running, but ultimately what you achieve is not a nice look and feel. Now, if this is the overall solution, what has Windows 10 to offer? Over the years, Microsoft has added a lot of features, and also they've changed their mind quite a bit around how to support multiple monitors with different DPIs and High DPI and 4K monitors in general. These are two separate issues, although they are connected. One thing is supporting High DPI in a way that is stable over time. So you have an application, it runs on a given DPI and remains on that DPI because that's what the target monitor has. A challenge is to make sure that you also support scenarios where the user has two monitors with different DPIs. And that's actually a fairly common case. Because what happens is that you need to react to the user dragging an application from one monitor to the other. Now, the operating system supports this scenario by considering the form on the monitor it covers for the most of its surface. There are some tricks on how to handle it, but basically there is one window that the form is considered to be onto, and that drives the look and feel and the output of the application. But again, things have been changing. The original version of Windows 10 was more strict in requiring you to update all of your code. Then later, Windows 10 introduced more backwards compatibility with the ability to just try to display older application with some scaling. They've introduced per monitor support, but that was not working terribly well. And then more recently, they've introduced per monitor version 2. That includes new APIs that allow you to ask for system information, for example, the size of a scroll bar, per monitor. So for the monitor the form is displayed onto. You could be tempted to say per the control, but that's not correct because the Windows manages the information at a form level, not at an individual control level, so at a main form level. This support that Windows provide doesn't solve all of the challenges. You still have issues, both standard and common controls on Windows, specifically around image list, because the image list component in itself and the way it interacts with list views, menus, toolbars has not really been updated to the modern world. So these older Windows standard controls or common controls are still a bit troublesome to manage. Now, to help understand some of the challenges around high DPI, let's look at a few things in practice and on screen. Here is the good old notepad, and you can actually see two instances of it that are on two separate monitors. I know it doesn't render great in the screen capture, but bear with me. This is on my high DPI to 100% scaling monitor. And this other one is on our regular scaling, lower resolution HD monitor. And you can see that Notepad looks smooth on both and things look proper. Notice also what happens when I move the application from one monitor to the other. For a little, this gets extra big on the side. And then when I move most of it to the new monitor, it gets rescaled. So this is not a perfect effect, but that's how Windows, the operating system, behaves. Now let me show you another application. This is an application built with VCL. You can see this application uses a regular image list, and on this 200% monitor, the images are fairly small. The rest of the text is smooth and looks fine, but the images are really small. By contrast, if I move it to this new monitor, images look good, but the scroll bars become completely garbled. This is an application compiled with the older per monitor support provided by Windows. I can also run a different version of the application. This one is not DPI aware. Now, it's not as bad as first sight. Icons are the right size and they remain the right size regardless of the monitor and the scaling, and scroll bars are good. But at this resolution, it is neat and smooth. At this higher resolution, everything, including the text, gets really jagged and doesn't look very good quality. Windows does offer compatibility. Most of the existing Windows applications can run declaring that they don't support, they're not DPI aware. However, the result is often substandard in terms of quality and in terms of the smoothness of images and even of the text. Which is why we want to really take advantage of the core features of the platform. Now, if this is a scenario in terms of the operating system and some of the hiccups you already experienced, as you see, there are several challenges in high DPI support and multi-monitor support. Windows provides some of the features that are relevant for it. And VCL has been continuously updated to support what the operating system provides and often improve on the low-level operating system support. Supports for dragging mount monitors has been around in VCL for some time, but for example, this lacked some of the smoothness you can achieve today thanks to the per monitor v2 support that Windows 10 has now, the VCL has starting in 10.3. As we'll see, this helps with the scaling of system elements. It's important that VCL keeps implementing the core features that Microsoft provides. However, there are cases where Microsoft does not provide a very good solution, like with image list. And so for that area, we've come up with a solution that is on top of what Microsoft provides and really frees you from some of the complications in managing images with the at the API level. So let's start with the High DPI image list. The concept is that rather than having a single image for each of the graphical elements you want to display, you can provide multiple resolution. Here you can see an example of a selected image with 3 different resolutions, 16 by 16, 24 by 24, and a much larger one. This is how you configure your image collection. You have a number of images with different sizes, different resolutions. There is a companion control, components called virtual image list. The virtual image list will hook to the image collection, and basically, depending on the current required DPI, it will slice the image collection for a given resolution. So supposedly, we are looking for a 24 by 24 images. That's what the virtual image list will contain only the 24 by 24 versions of the images in the collection. If an image is not available at that size, it will be rendered from the closest one. That's not ideal, but it's still better than, of course, not having the image. The image collection handles multiple resolutions, handles alpha channels, handles high DPI images, and through the virtual image list, it's compatible with the platform image list handle. And so you can use this new combination of controls with any of the platform controls, whether it's a button, it's a menu, it's a toolbar. Now, there is one caveat that the virtual image list is DPI aware, so it has to be on the form that you want to be able to scale for multi-monitor scenario. If you place that virtual image list in data module or leave it on the main form, then the system won't really work because it won't be able to pick the proper images for the corresponding resolution. Now let me show this much better through a demo. For this first demo, let's focus specifically on issues with image list in an application. In this case, I have a toolbar with a few images in an image list. It's a fairly standard approach. And one of the images is also connected to the button. So I have some of the images in the toolbar and some and one in the button. Now I do have a further option here, which is manual scaling of the form using scale by, which is kind of a way to emulate what happens in the scaling scenarios. So let me actually run this application. And you can see it looks fairly nice until I scale it. At this point, the images remain way too small and the quality isn't proper. I mean, this really doesn't look good. Of course, the more I scale it, the worse everything becomes, but that's a bit excessive. I mean, 4 times scaling. In a moment, I'll show you how this behaves with in a multi-monitor scenario as well. Now, what's the solution that the VCL provides? as mentioned, is to use an image collection. Now in this case, for each of the images, you can have multiple resolutions in your collection. How you add these images, there is an add operation. You can do multiple selections, and the system will try to use the images with the same name, a separator, and a size to associate all of those images as a single image with multiple resolutions. If not, you can manually add, you can just add one resolution and then manually add the different versions of the same image in the bottom part of this image collection editor. Once this is set up, it's useless in itself, but what you can do is use a virtual image list. The virtual images connects to the image collection. It can be used as a property, for example, for the button or the toolbar, or for any component that expects a Windows common control image list. Now I'm not going to do it because when I do it, I can have code to change this at runtime. Now notice I don't need to specify the DPI in the virtual image list. This is captured automatically depending on the form hosting the virtual images and the DPI of that specific form at runtime. Now there are other features. You can manage grayscale, generate grayscale images, and a few more things, but let's focus on the scaling and on the core concepts of the virtual image list. Okay, so the virtual image list kind of creates a slice of the collection and makes it available to control. And that happens at runtime and can change at runtime. So let me run this again. If I toggle the list, now I have more or less the same UI. But when I do the scaling, the system will grab the higher resolution images instead and make this really smooth, even at a very high resolution. Now, the same works also in a multi-monitor scenario. So this is the application running on my lower resolution monitor, and I'm using the traditional image list. As I move it to the high resolution monitor, images become way too small, and while the rest of the components adapt, images don't. If I pick the new image collection with the virtual image list, now what happens is that as I move, image list gets refreshed, the virtual images will create a new slice depending on the change DPI, and will grab the right images from the collection. This is without any specific code to handle this transition. There's really no custom code in this application, so the VCL would do this for you once everything is properly configured. The other area I want to focus on is the per monitor v2 support. This is available with a manifest setting, so you can just pick it in the manifest, but that's really not exactly enough to have the feature available. There's another requirement, which is to be on a recent version of Windows 10. I mean, not so recent, but from the last year. The feature, the per monitor v2 support, has been introduced in Creators Update, which is a little less than 2 years old. If one of your customers is on an older version of Windows 10, the feature won't be available. And of course, that's also not available on Windows 7. What's the key concept around per monitor v2? The concept is that there is a new API, a new version of the GetSystemMetric API that allows you to read the information for one specific handle, for one specific form, and that would depend on the DPI on the monitor the form is displayed onto. So while the classic GetSystemMetrics offers only information for the main monitor, the new GetSystemMetrics for DPI offers it for the handle. Now, what's the implication of this change? Well, that wherever you have a GetSystemMetrics call, you would have to replace it with the new call, but only if your customer is in a new version of Windows, or you get an error because you cannot invoke an API that's not physically available. I mean, this uses delay loading, so you can still run the application, but you get a crash when you try to call it. So what we've done is create a placeholder function, a helper, called GetSystemMetrics for Windows, which embeds that logic. It will call either the traditional GetSystemMetrics or the new one, depending on the version of Windows you're onto and the status of the per monitor V2 support in your application. If you want the feature to be available, you could replace calls to GetSystemMetrics API to this new internal helper function. However, that would be a lot of work, and would have been a lot of work for us, because we found out we have over 300 calls to GetSystemMetrics in the VCL. So what we did was actually implement a trick, which is adding a GetSystemMetrics method into control. So for each of your controls forms, in custom controls and so forth, when there is a call to GetSystemMetrics, that gets redirected to the method. Now, you might not want this to happen. In that case, you need to preface it with WinAPI unit, but in most cases this is the right solution, and this almost automatically converts our existing VCL code to use the new model and to have get your system metrics that are the correct information for the specific form you are displaying. Again, let me guide you through some of the code, and that can help us better understand what the VCL offers and how you can adapt your code to support the new features and improve your application UI. So let's look at the system metrics change and do so with demos that work across monitors, because that's where things really make a difference. So I'm displaying my screen with part of the main monitor and the secondary monitor with the RAD Studio IDE. As you might notice, this is actually 10.2, not RAD Studio 10.3, and I'm running this very simple application that makes a GetSystemMetrics API call and asks for the size of the horizontal scroll bar. If I run it, the application gives the value of 34, and it gives that value regardless of the monitor it is displayed on. This is the behavior of the API this code is mapped to, which is the GetSystemMetrics Windows classic Windows API. Now, this is the same application in RAD Studio 10.3. The application has the same code, but if I run it, it will end up with a different behavior. This is the application in the high resolution screen and reports 34 for the scroll bar size, while as I move to the secondary screen, it says return 17, which is the size of the scroll bar for the lower resolution. Now, there's really no extra code here. The trick is that the GetSystemMetrics calls get redirected rather than coming from WinAPI Windows. They come locally. So if you want to keep your code exactly as it was, you have to prefix the calls with WinAPI Windows. We had a couple of customers complaining that they had already implemented their own way, so they want to keep the code with the API calls. That's the solution around it. If not, the call GetSystemMetrics now maps to the VCL, to the T-control GetSystemMetrics method in the VCL, In turns, this refers to a custom function, as I mentioned, GetSystemMetric for Windows. And this would make a call to either the classic API, ignoring the per monitor v2 support, if that's not available, or we'll call the new GetMetrics for DPI function that Microsoft introduced. That happens if a handle is provided, if Windows is at least 10.1439, sorry, and if the per monitor v2 is declared in the manifest or has been set for the application. So we check the Windows DPI awareness at runtime for that. The call to GetSystemMetric for DPI passes the DPI for the specific window. This is another API call, passing the handle of the window in question. Now, this handle is not the handle of the control, but it is the handle of the main window contained by the control. So tcontrol calls get allocated Windows handle, which cycles through the parent chain up to the top. So it returns the main form hosting the control. We've seen this working, but what's more interesting is that if we go back to the other application, the form with the grid, the one that was showing originally as being faulty, what we can do is go in the project options and enable per monitor v2 support. And now we will get one of the issues fixed, namely the size of the scroll bar looks regular on the regular monitor, but remains of the right size also in the lower resolution monitor. What does not work is the toolbar items, and that's because I need to patch it, and that's where you'll have to put it some work. And to do that, I need to grab these two controls from here, given I already have the ready to use configuration, drop them here, remove this image list, I just skipping it around, and make sure that the toolbar refers now to the new virtual image collection, virtual image list. Now, if I save it and build it once more, the application now has the right controls in the high resolution monitor and the right scroll bars, and also right controls in the toolbar and right scroll bars in the lower resolution monitor. Again, in this case, you have to change your code. In most cases, to support the proper sizing and the proper DPI or proper scroll bars, there isn't much you have to do unless you have fine-tuned the calls to GetSystemMetrics and other functions, or unless you need to update your custom controls we have written to consider that scenario. Now, the new image collection and virtual image list and the per monitor v2 support are clearly key features for 10.3 VCL in terms of Windows and High DPI. There are other things that have been done that are related, although not all of them are strictly related. We have exposed a lot of the low-level native APIs for High DPI, even more than what we use in the VCL. We've also exposed other APIs like the WM pointer, the pen support areas, and more. And additionally, we have enhanced the WinRT APIs that are available through Object Pascal headers. including a lot of new units and a new component in Windows Store for desktop Bridge application. In summary, VCL helps you build Windows 10 applications in general and stunning Windows 10 UIs. It offers full platform support, full API support. It tries to do it maintaining the highest compatibility with Windows 7, although not all of the latest features are Windows 7 compatible. You can build great UIs, migrating and expanding VCL applications to support High DPI rather than having to rewrite your application from scratch with a different UI library and a different approach. Image collection is really a new innovative feature, and so is remapping of these API calls. With other types of solutions, you'll have to come up with your own model and implementation. Again, our focus is try to make it easy to build new High DPI applications with the VCL for Windows 10, but also make it easy to migrate existing applications to leverage the platform features. And finally, remember, we also have Windows Store support as part of your overall value proposition for VCL. If you're not convinced, try it for yourself. Download a RAD Studio trial of 10.3 and see how the High DPI support works in the product. Thanks, and let's open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, Marco. I'd like to transition to the Q&A portion of today's webinar at this time. It looks like we have a few questions that have been submitted. If you're still with us and have a question, please submit it via the Q&A panel. First off, Marco, we have multiple questions asking about native SVG file support. Can you explain what's supported today and what's planned?
Yeah, for now we're just supporting bitmap type of images, like whether it's PNG or other formats. The reason is that we started focusing mostly on the compatibility with the Windows platform image list that requires a set of bitmaps. Now, it is true that those bitmaps could be generated from the vector representation, and that's something it's on our to-do list as a future extension for this library, and it would be a very nice extension, the ability to just provide an SVG file. Now, the kind of mitigation is that there are libraries that, many of the icon libraries and graphical libraries will do that step for you. We ship one, which is available in Gettys. It's called Icon 8, if I'm not wrong. And this basically has a UI. You pick an SVG file, and it will generate the bitmaps and PNGs for all of the resolutions you're interested in a fairly automatic way. Also, the thing I haven't shown is that when you have an image collection, if you name the source files properly, and again, some of these tools will automatically generate proper names, you can really batch import everything in a very smooth way. So we're not to the point to leverage directly SVG. That's something we are planning for the future, and it is a great idea.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that each form will need its own virtual image list, but can the image list component be shared?
Yeah, the point is that the image collection can be shared. So you can put your image collection in a data module, and that will be fine for everyone. Now, if you want to have multiple image collections because you want to separate your images but group them anyway, fine, of course you can do it. But the concept is you have the image collection wherever you want. The virtual image list that in most cases has very limited configuration, that needs to be on a visual container with the same DPI you're displaying those images. So if it's in the form, it will be on the form. That's how the system automatically picks up the right DPI, for example, when you're dragging the form from one place to the other. The virtual image list will check the DPI of the container form and will apply it. If you suppose put the virtual image list in a data module, and then linking from two forms, the data module probably results as being on the primary monitor, and you won't be able to have this automated scaling.
Okay, thanks, Marco. Just to take a step back, just because I don't think that I heard it during your presentation, can you define what actually qualifies as high DPI?
Well, it's everything with probably higher than. Well, there are two ways to qualify it. One is any high resolution, anything going above the HDMI type of resolution, of course, including 4K monitor, but even below. I mean, my monitor, the monitor was displaying some demos from is a 4K monitor, but even lower than that, you can consider high DPI. Although most of the high DPI issues start happening when you are applying scaling on Windows. So when you're not using 100% resolution on your desktop, but you're moving to 150 to 100, 300% resolution on the desktop, because that's where things start going a bit weird. Because if you have even if you have a very high resolution, but you find having everything extremely small, you are still using the same mapping, but it's not usable. I mean, at 4K with a 4K monitor, if you don't scale up Windows, I mean, things are nonsensical. I mean, you need your glasses for,
yeah, I might need a stronger prescription.
No. So that's kind of the tilting point when you need to start scaling, because that's where things start going weird at the operating system level. And you can just do direct mapping. Now you can ask Windows to do the planned direct scaling. Everything gets bigger, but it's not smooth, and it doesn't look very good.
Are there any tests, Marco, that you would recommend developers use to assess whether or not their existing applications need to be more high DPI aware?
I mean, if developers don't have a 4K monitor, they need one. First, because it's so great to use. And second, I mean, it's a pleasure on your eyes when you're staring at the screen days and days. But also because it's a good way to test. I mean, above that, well, it's a bit extreme. But there are more and more customers, especially targeting power users and not like home consumers, that have high resolution monitors, and so being able to make sure your application looks good on those monitors is important.
Okay, Marco, our next question is: although this was a VCL based discussion, are similar high DPI techniques available for FMS on Windows?
Well, yes and no. So the positive thing is that FireMonkey since the beginning had the concept of multi-device images. So when an image collection, an image list in FireMonkey is a collection where you can specify, it's not based on DPI, it's specified on scaling. So you can have the 1.0 scale images, the 2.0 scale images, 3.0, and that is a requirement for mobile, for iOS, for Mac, for Android, and you can leverage that on Windows. So the image scaling is available. Is not as automatic like when you're using two monitors, so you might have to tweak in, I mean, manually determine from the DPI which is the scaling you want to use. But that was there and was easier to do because again, it didn't require hooking into an operating system component like the Windows platform image list. In terms of multi-monitor support, I think VCL is a little ahead. FireMonkey has some of the core tenets being abstracted. You can zoom and scale things a little easier, especially when you're not using native controls like edits and so forth on Windows. However, it's true that we are putting more focus and effort on the VCL side of the high DPI. We do need to get back to the FireMonkey side and clean it up.
Okay. Marco, will the code that you used during the webinar be shared?
Yeah, I think I already shared the link. It's on my GitHub account. So github.com/Marco Cantu. There is a Delphi sessions area where I just added like minutes ago the 3 demos for this webinar, and it's easy to find. So I'll probably blog tomorrow and provide some further information in the link and everything.
Terrific. Thank you for that. Our next question is, are there any examples of WM_pointer support?
No, I don't have any example with the pen support. The problem I have personally is that I do not have a device that has that capability. You need one of those newer notebooks or tablets that have the pen, because the pen has the pressure information, which is, so the pen doesn't just emulate a mouse like it was in the past. Now you can have another concept, which is the pressure. And therefore, Microsoft added a brand new API for that. Now, we were not even exposing the API, which was a problem for anyone wanting to manually handle these messages like in the forms or the components. And there are also quite a few APIs that you need to call. So we expose the API. It's not, we can claim it's fully integrated at the VCL level. That would be the next step.
Okay. Marco, do you have planned support for alpha blending and the C virtual image list?
Well, that's a question I don't have the answer for. I thought we had some of it, but I'm not 100% sure of the status. So I'll have to research. If you want to send me an email about that, I'll make sure I find the right info and provide it.
Okay. We talked a little bit about MMS Windows applications, and I think that was geared towards the high DPI, but is per monitor V2 support functionality going to be added to FMS?
No, that will require to be supported at the styles level. Although, I mean, most of the graphic on FireMonkey is more abstracted compared to the operating system level. So some of it is not as negatively affected compared to Windows. Like, for example, another bug on Windows that I thought I could have displayed and I haven't, was like if you had like a if you have like a checkbox, or even worse, a radio button, and when you use the older scaling mode, you'll have the text that scales, but the checkbox, I mean, the radio button remains extremely small and like hard to click. That's something that per monitor V2 fixes, because again, it's something that depends on the monitor. Now, FireMonkey abstracts a lot of the measures and a lot of the information using styles, and styles are more neutral from the operating system. So FireMonkey is not affected as badly. Now, that doesn't mean it could benefit from that support, but it hasn't been done for 10.3.
Okay. Marco, the next question is concerning, will repeated moldiv while rescaling when moving between monitors result in size position errors?
If you have some fairly complex scenarios with alignments and anchors and so forth, it might happen. We don't have any specific bug open on that as far as I can remember. I'm not saying it will never happen, but and honestly, it was smoother. It is smoother on the real screen than on the recording. The other thing from the recording that I realized that I probably should have mentioned that in the video, but I saw it now that I was looking into it with more care, is that, I mean, everything looks very big on the high resolution monitor. That's not true. I mean, the form remains about the same size. It looks bigger because the screen capture that I'm using for the videos uses pixels and not the RAD DPI. So the form remains about the same size, but you were seeing it like getting very big. So that was a bad kind of a negative effect. But honestly, it's quite difficult to use screen capture tool to capture across monitors, and that was what I could.
I actually think you did a great job. I think that's kind of a difficult thing to show.
I thought I could have used a camera and display, but then the quality was so bad that it's like, okay, let's get rid of the camera. That's not going to work.
Okay. Marco, is there a tool available to create higher scaled icons from the current 24x24 ones?
Not a tool that we provide. There are tons of tools out there in terms of market and other things. if I had to do that manually, I know that I have a couple of I use a very old graphic design tool that can go in a folder and like rescale everything. I mean, apply a logic on an entire folder of hundreds of images and just a batch processing type of thing. But again, I recommend, if you haven't done so, look in some solution like Icons 8, which are open source icon to some limits. I don't remember what the rule, which I even hosted on Getit, or some other of these tools that provide free or fairly cheap icons and buttons and images with like a huge selection for like a few dollars, if not free.
Okay. Another question on scaling is, have you experienced the issue or workaround where a lot of font sizes have issues scaling for 150% or higher?
No, I haven't seen that much, but I haven't really delved into the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the other thing, I think I saw a couple of questions around this. The ID itself is not, I mean, it hasn't got these features enabled. The reason is that the VCL side of it could handle it, but we have a lot of other code in the IDE which is not strictly VCL because it's older, newer, different, whatever, and starting with the editor. And so we still don't enable. I mean, the IDE uses the Windows model of just trying to render it properly. Honestly, I have to say that I use it on my 4K monitor, and it's not perfect. You can see that the text is a little jagged, but it's really not such a big deal. On the other hand, if you try to enable the DPI awareness, per monitor DPI awareness, the ID gets a bit weird. So it's really not recommended.
Okay. The next question is, do these new components support Microsoft UI automation?
I would say yes, because they don't work around anything that's native Windows. They just augment what is native Windows behavior. So I don't see any reason that shouldn't work. I mean, of course, FireMonkey is different because FireMonkey is painted, is abstracted. But if you stick to VCL, like the images are non-visual components, and all it boils down to the per monitor v2 is figuring out how big something is. So it's not a core change in the architecture.
Okay. Can the contents of T-image collection be filled dynamically at runtime?
Yes, you can change it, modify it. There is a designer, but you can do. I mean, the designer is ultimately a VCL small application that runs in the IDE. Everything you can do in code. I'm not sure about things like the splitting the images and figuring out from the rules which one is which, like the import-export tooling. That might not be part of the component itself, but in terms of adding, dynamically removing, changing images runtime, that's 100% available.
What is the best way to scale VCL edit boxes and labels for high DPI when the user resizes a Delphi 10.3 VCL form?
Well, one of the options is to do scaling or resize. I'm not terribly fond of it because it works only within some limits in terms of resolutions, but that's a possibility. I mean, scale by does work. It's been in the product since a lot of time, and it works with native controls as well. I'm not a terrible fan of it. The other option is leave things small, but yeah, at that point, things might become way too small. The other thing that was noticing is that over the last few years, we added a lot of additional components. Panels that help working as containers, and these type of containers can help mean, can provide new ways for aligning and connecting the sizes of the different controls. Because when you resize something, I mean, everything else might have to follow up properly. So things like the relative panel or other containers are actually quite nice in terms of allowing you to build more flexible UIs, along with all of the classic features like anchoring and aligning and so forth.
Okay. Marco, what size images do you recommend as best practice for image collection to use with buttons?
I mean, if you want just to pick one, you should pick a fairly high resolution. The problem if you just like say, hey, let's go like 128, is that when you're scaling them down, I mean, scaling down can be as bad as scaling up. It's not that it's always that good. So probably something in between. I mean, a 32 by 32 thing will scale up somewhat, but the recommendation is really to provide more than one resolution, because that helps covering a higher range of DPIs and monitors.
Okay.
But it's true that if a resolution is missing, the virtual images tries to provide it. But again, it does it by scaling, so results will vary.
All right.
It also depends a lot on the original image. Some images scale a little better than others.
Marco, we have a couple of repeat questions about the future of the IDE and its high DPI awareness.
Yeah, we're working on making the IDE DPI aware. Every cycle internally in the internal build, we turn it on and then see what happens. And then we fix a few bugs and then we say, okay, that's not enough. It's still not usable, so we turn it off. Partially is that there are a few features related with styling that are not there. We know that we need to do some re-architecturing on the VCL styling support to improve the high DPI awareness. And that's a kind of a precondition before we can really tackle the IDE. The other, as I was saying, is that we should either get rid of replace or work on some of the older surfaces that we have. We have C++ code, C code. We have, I mean, that's not VCL, it's just plain Windows API. And we also have other artifacts that came from Java designers and other areas. Like everything that's in the IDE is not styled with the new black or white styling. That's because it's not VCL. So there's more work, but we are going in that direction and making continuous progress.
Okay, Marco, the next question is, if they just have one size icon or image, how does Virtual Image List treat it? Will it still attempt to scale it for all screen sizes if the other sizes aren't available?
Yes, the virtual image, one of the benefits of virtual images is that it does the scaling for you, because if you don't, you'll just see very small images, like in some of the videos, in some of my demos. So the virtual images will do that scaling up or down, and it's better than nothing. It's probably better than having a minuscule thing that you can even see. The virtual images also does a few other things for you if you want. It can also generate the grayed images. So well, if you provide colorful images, when you need to generate the disabled images and you want them to be grayed out, you don't have to provide them. You can rely on the virtual image list to do the grayscaling of the images. So you don't also need another set of images with this grayscale for each of the sizes. That's something the virtual images can generate for you. It's an option that you need to enable and trigger, but it is available. So it does. There are a few transformations on the images that the virtual image list can do on your behalf.
Okay. Marco, we've reached the end of our time together. Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for everybody that has been submitting questions. I'd like to remind everybody that today's webinar was recorded. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with the link to the recording tomorrow. If you have additional questions, I think Marco has provided his contact information, as well as we have the community forums. So ask away, and then let us know what you think about the webinar. Thank you so much. We look forward to you joining us next time. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.